Hello, folks. Thanks so much for tuning into my channel and welcome back. My name is Tawia Patrick Matope, and this is a channel where I talk about anything to do with social work, specifically child protection and safeguarding. Today's topic is by public demand, really. Some people have written to me asking me to talk about the few things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Before I go into the topic of the day today, which is I'm going to be talking about the main reasons why sometimes social services or child protection services, proceed to be removing children from their parents. I'm just going to put a disclaimer to say I'm not a legal expert, and the views which I share with you on this channel are my own views from my own practice and from my own observations. These are nuggets which I'm sharing, from my own experiences and so forth, but it's not to be taken as advice, or it's not to be taken as legal advice at all. If you need legal advice, please approach solicitors and you'll be able to get legal advice. Right? So the topic I'm going to be talking to you about today is with regards to the main reasons why social services or child protection or the safeguarding teams actually take the step of removing children from their parents in order to protect or in order to safeguard them. One thing I'm going to say as well before I jump into explaining or talking about these reasons is that you don't need to take these reasons in isolation. Sometimes these reasons do come, as a, complementing other reasons, or sometimes they are joined up together with other reasons which might be prevailing at that particular time. So when I give a reason, you're not supposed to be taking it in isolation, but usually social care would be looking at this, at each and every particular case as an individual, and also take into account the history of that particular family or those children being known to social care. And at the end of the day, it's accumulation of all those factors which might lead into a decision as to social care or social services actually making a decision to say we need to be seeking legal advice, or we need to be going to court to seek removal of these children from this specific parent. One thing also I'm going to be emphasizing or making clear to either parents or to professionals who are working in children's services is this is the option of last resort for all local authorities that you can think of, all local authorities that you can engage with. This is the reason of last resort, meaning that usually social care would put in support first and see whether parents are going to be able to address the reasons why children are open to social care. And if that doesn't work, sometimes they'll be looking at are there other friends and family who can actually support this family in terms of addressing the concerns, or as well as keeping these children safe and ensure that they are safeguarded. And usually going to court would be the option of last resort. I need to be emphasizing that to say it would be an option of last resort. And whenever a local authority goes to court, it means there are compelling reasons why those children would need to be removed from their parents. And it doesn't necessarily mean that when a local authority takes a family to court or goes to court in terms of seeking removal of particular children, the outcome would be those children will be removed. There are other legal processes that actually happen, or there are other processes that actually happen within the courts, which I might actually tackle in one of the videos to explain to you what happens when a case goes to court. Because there are other, there are a few solicitors who are involved in court whenever a child is removed from the parents. So I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. But today's video, I'm just going to focus on the main common reasons why children may be removed from their parents. And I think I'm just going to talk about 15. It doesn't, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, and it doesn't need to be taken as legal advice, or it doesn't need to be taken as the only reasons why social care remove children from their parents. There are many other reasons why children could be removed from the care of their parents, but I'm just going to give you a few nuggets which I think would help clarify things for professionals as well as for families who are actually engaging with social care. Reason number one, the main or reason number one, possibly I would say abuse and neglect. When it comes to abuse and neglect, I'm just going to break down abuse, because obviously there is emotional abuse, there is physical abuse, there is sexual abuse, and then there is neglect. So abuse and neglect is one of the main reasons why local authorities usually end up going to court to seek removal of children. Usually this would be accumulation of more than one concerning incidents where children have been exposed to physical abuse, or where children have been exposed to persistent emotional abuse, or where children have been exposed to chronic neglect, right? And when you are working with professionals, especially social workers and other professionals whom you'll be working with, within the core groups or within the child and need review meetings, they are trained professionals who are able to distinguish between neglect and poverty, because those are two different things at all. They are trained professionals who are able to distinguish what neglect is and what poverty is, because poverty is not neglect and neglect is not necessarily poverty. Right. So physical, emotional, as well as sexual abuse, as well as severe neglect. This needs to be, persistent neglect for the local authority to say, you know what, we need to be seeking legal advice and we need to be taking this case before the courts and to let the courts make a decision. Local authority is not going to remove your children without a court order. The only other arm of the government which is able to remove children from your care would be the police, under what we call police protection. If police respond to your property and what they are observing there is quite concerning, and they feel that the children may continue to be at risk if they remain in your care, then the police will exercise their police protection powers to remove those children from your care and liaise with social care to make sure that the children's needs continue to be met. And usually police protection do last for 72 hours. And within those 72 hours, it's up to the social care to make other alternative care arrangements for those children, including, like I said, going to court is the last resort. Other alternative arrangements that can be made may also include looking for friends and family who are able to take care of the children. I mentioned about friends and family. That's quite important for you to know. The other main reason why sometimes local authorities end up seeking legal advice and proceeding to go to court is substance misuse on the part of the parents. Substance misuse on its own, or substance use on its own, may not necessarily be the reason, but it's about what happens when parents do take substances. Usually, if it degenerates into domestic violence, usually if it degenerates into children's needs being neglected, or usually if it degenerates into a situation where the children are put at risk, then that's another reason why local authorities may end up considering taking such matters to court and bring them before the attention of the courts. So parental substance misuse is one of the reasons why local authorities end up going to court, especially if it endangers the well-being or the welfare of a child or children. Then the local authority will need to be stepping in and to be taking such kind of a matter to court. It is very important. I'm going to put another video on what parents who are open to social care, what it is that they can do to avoid local authority actually seeking legal advice with regards to their children. There are steps that parents can actually take to address the concerns which have been highlighted by the social worker or by the professionals in order to address those concerns and avoid the situation where the local authority may end up going to court. So I think it's quite important to take note of that as well. Domestic violence, number 3, that's another main concern or main worry which leads to local authorities going to court. Usually domestic violence, when it happens persistently over a long period of time and there is clear evidence of how the children are being impacted by such domestic violence, then the local authority may end up with no other option other than taking that case to court, especially with all the other measures which they have tried to put in place to support the family, to make sure that the parents address some of these concerns are not taken on board or it's not working. Then the local authority will have to step in, take that matter to court and ensure that the courts makes a decision on the long-term care needs of those particular children. So I think it's quite important to make sure of that. In terms of exposure to domestic violence or exposure to violence in general, it's not necessarily about domestic violence. Because when we talk about domestic violence, we're talking about things that are happening within the household. But remember, when the children persistently get exposed to violence, even in the community, while they're in the care of their parents, that can be a cause of concern, because it depends with what sort of violence the children are exposed to, and are the parents not actually actively protecting or safeguarding the children, then that can be a matter of concern as well. Right. Point number 4 is mental health, parental mental health. When parents present with mental health issues and these issues are not being addressed, they don't adhere to the medication which has been prescribed by the mental health professionals. They don't adhere to any advice which has been prescribed. They don't adhere to the safety plan which has been put in place by social care. The mental health is at such a level where the children's needs possibly are not being met, then that can be another cause of concern for the local authority to consider taking that case to court as well. So I would say severe untreated mental health problems affecting your ability to parent those children may lead the local authority to be considering whether they will need to be taking action with regards to those children. But remember, you don't need to be looking on these factors or on these risk factors in isolation. Sometimes it can be a combination. For example, there is what we call the toxic trio, where there's domestic violence, there is poor mental health, and there is also substance misuse. That could sometimes make the local authority want to be taking that case and present it before the courts for the courts to make a decision. So I think that is also quite important for you to take note of. And then the fifth one, which is quite common in some local authorities, but not only in all local authorities, is where children are exposed or are actively encouraged to engage in criminal activity, whether within the family or within the community, and parents are not taking any action in terms of supporting the children to be staying away from trouble, where children are persistently exposed to criminal activity, whether it is the parents who are engaging in criminal activity, leading them to be arrested quite often and be sent to jail, and then the children will be left with nobody else to take care of. Sometimes the local authority may have to assess that situation and step in to make sure that the children's long-term care needs are met, whilst adults continue to be gallivanting and doing whatever they want. So parental involvement in illegal activities might also impact on the child's well-being. That's quite crucial and for you to be taken note of. Point number 6, unsafe living conditions. It's not always the case that whenever there is unsafe living conditions, the local authority will step in and want to be, presenting that case to court. But it depends with what support has been put in place. If support has been put in place and it's not being taken up, and if advice is given and is not being taken up, and children continue to be in an environment which is not safe for them, the local authority may need to be looking into that particular case as well and consider whether there is need for them to be stepping in or whether it meets threshold for them to be going to court. Point number 7, failure to protect. This is really, really important. I think it ties in with what I mentioned earlier on about, parents letting children being involved in criminal activity and them failing to be putting in place measures that might stop that from happening. So I think it's also quite crucial to take note of that. In terms of failure to protect, we are talking of an inability of the parent to protect the child from harm or possible dangers. It could be within the family home or outside the family home. If you are living in a particular family home where there is somebody who is considered to be a risk to children and you are not properly supervising that individual, that can be failure to protect as well. So you need to be taking note of that. And when a social worker or professionals advise you to be sticking to a safety plan, it's quite important for people to be taking note of that and to be adhering to that kind of safety plan. Right. Point number 8, medical neglect. There are children who might present with medical problems which require possibly appointments and consistent taking of medication, consistent advice from relevant professionals. And when that doesn't happen, when children's health needs are neglected, that is termed as medical neglect. And sometimes that could be another reason why the local authority, because sometimes, we know very well it might lead to the child's, obviously, if the child's health needs are not met, it might lead to that child suffering significant harm. So that could be another reason as well for the local authority to be stepping in and, taking protective action in order to safeguard that child. So medical neglect, failure to provide necessary medical care for a child's health conditions, that is quite crucial. Point number 8, educational neglect. When children are persistently late to school, this ties with the point number 1, which I mentioned about neglect, chronic and persistent neglect. Sometimes it is also linked to medical neglect as well as educational neglect, where parents are not actively encouraging their children to be in a form of education. Remember, statutorily for primary school, I think children, sometimes parents can choose to or can elect to homeschool their children, which is fine. But remember, you need to be registered with the local authority to notify them that I'm homeschooling my child, because there are some checks which will need to be done as well by the local authority to make sure that you are following the curriculum and the child is actually engaged at the time that they are supposed to be engaged in educational activities. So educational neglect, that's another issue as well. We are talking of chronic truancy. We are talking of neglecting the educational needs of the child. And then point number 10, we are talking of abandonment. We all know there are instances where a parent may just abandon a child for reasons known to them. That is another reason why the local authority may actually step in, especially if there are no family members who have been identified to be able to step in and temporarily take care of that child until the parents recuperates from whether they are drunk or whatever it is. Sometimes it also leads to the local authority to step in as well. We are talking of a situation where children can be deserted or a prolonged absence without providing care. You go on a holiday and leave a 10-year-old or 11-year-old in the house for, you are saying, I'm going for a couple of hours, and then by the time you notice, you are leaving a 10-year-old or 11-year-old in the house on their own for the whole day or for 2 days or for a whole week. That can be abandonment, and the local authority may end up stepping in such kind of a situation, especially if it's brought to their attention. So we need to be mindful of that as well. Abandonment in some developing countries, I remember when I was practicing in Namibia as well as in Zimbabwe, we would have children dumped babies. As social workers, we need to be stepping in and make sure that the welfare of that child and their needs are met, in that situation, whilst parents or other relatives can be traced. And sometimes if they can't be traced, that child may be placed into foster care and eventually, be adopted if ever there are potential adopters out there. Right. The other point is persistent parental incarceration, where parents are consistently in and out of prison, and it doesn't offer consistency to the children's lives. There are times also like that where the local authority may end up stepping in to make sure that the children's long-term care needs and their stability is actually met. If that can be done within the children's time scales, the local authority would need to be stepping in to be making sure that the children's long-term care needs are actually met. This includes extended periods of imprisonment for both parents. Unstable environment. I think we are talking of constant instability affecting the child's well-being to an extent that there is instances where sometimes we're talking of transient families. I'm not talking of traveler families here, but because that's a cultural and it's known that that's their culture. But I'm talking of a situation where if concerns are being raised, a family moves from one area to the other, they lead a transient lifestyle in order to avoid professionals and so forth. It will come a point where if all the chronology of all the histories is tabulated together and, there is an identification of the fact that there is a persistent avoidance by the parents, which is offering those children instability, the local authority may end up stepping in and putting in measures that will make sure that that child have, stability and, a consistent kind of life in their, going forward. Point number 13, failure to follow court orders. This is quite crucial, especially where a supervision order has been issued or where a child arrangements order has been issued or where there is any court order, whether in public proceedings or private proceedings, which is not being adhered to. And the failure of the parent to adhere to that order is putting the child's life at risk or at significant risk of harm. Then the local authority may actually think of stepping in to put protective measures in place. We need to be mindful of that. Point number 14, the child's well-being is at risk. There are many things that can put a child's well-being at risk, including female genital mutilation, including arranged child marriages, including physical abuse, which I spoke about earlier on. A situation where the child's well-being is consistently at risk or is at significant risk because of something imminent that's going to be happening. Sometimes the local authority may step in, especially, for example, if a child discloses that with school holidays, I'm going to be going to country X and female genital mutilation is going to be happening there. Sometimes the local authority may step in and need to be putting in place measures to make sure that that child is safeguarded. And it will be up to the courts to consider the information in front of the judge, for them to make a decision as to what should be happening in terms of the long-term care needs of that particular child. So we are talking of incidents where the child's life is at imminent danger, including radicalization as well, or including situations where it's imminent that the child is going to be taken to a place where their life is going to be at risk. So that is another reason why, sometimes local authorities will need to be stepping in. Point number 15, which is going to be the last point to talk about. This is the last point I'm going to be talking about because it bundles up everything else that we've spoken about, the last 14 points. That's unfit parenting. All the other things that we spoke about earlier on might lead to unfit parenting, which is going to be another reason why the local authority may end up, stepping in. Usually, unfit parenting might be seen after things like a child and family assessment has been completed, or sometimes a parenting assessment has been completed, or sometimes a pre-birth assessment has been completed, and it is deemed that the parent is not able to give good enough parenting, or the parent is an unfit parent. Then that could be another reason why the local authority would be able to step in and put protective measures in place to make sure that the child's welfare and their needs are met, in a safe manner. We are talking of an overall inability of the parent to meet the child's physical as well as emotional needs, including all the other reasons which we spoke about earlier on. So these are some of the reasons why, the local authority may end up stepping in and thinking of presenting that case before the courts to consider, the long-term care needs of that particular child, to make sure that they are safeguarded going forward. Last but not least, I'm going to mention that the removal of a child from their parent is typically a last resort measure for the local authority. A typical last resort measure for the local authority. And when efforts have been made to support and rehabilitate families wherever possible, if those efforts are not, or if the parents are not engaging fully, or when the child continues to be persistently at risk of significant harm, that's when the local authority may need to be stepping in, to be taking, corrective measures to make sure that the child's welfare is actually, remember, the child's welfare is always of paramount importance. With these nuggets, I hope you have, got something from it. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, and you can actually share this video so that, and you can hit that like button so that when I share another video, you'll be the first person to be notified, and you'll be able to benefit from these few nuggets. Remember, as a disclaimer, these videos are not there to be legal advice. If you need legal advice, speak to a solicitor. If you need further information, if you're open social care, speak to your social worker, speak to their team manager for you to get clarity on what is going on. These videos are not meant to be advice to parents, but they're just nuggets which I'm sharing from my own experiences. But I think it might help somebody else to kind of know one or a few things that you may need to know. Thank you so much.